Welcome to Dad Talk Today. The podcast for dads facing some of the toughest moments of their lives. We are here to walk with men through divorce, keep them connected to their kids, help them understand their rights, and work for change in family law courts. Moms, you are always welcome too. We are all about advocating for shared parenting and doing what is best for our kids. Here is your host, Eric Carroll.
Hey everybody, welcome to Dad Talk Today. I am honored to be with Dr. Ben Carson today. Dr. Carson, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. Good to be with you again.
Yes, sir. So Dr. Carson, we talk a little bit about what's going on with the fatherless issue, and I know you're no stranger to that. Could you tell us what it was like in your experience and growing up as a child without a father?
Well, it was very difficult. In those days, divorce wasn't nearly as common as it is today. And when you were from a broken home, you were in the minority. That has changed at this time very significantly. But, not having that guiding influence of a father and an authority figure is very detrimental to many young men, particularly. Now, in my case, my mother was a very authoritarian figure, so it kind of made up for it a little bit. But to a degree, a lot of it had to do with the fact that we were believers and believed that we had obligations to God. And I think that kept both me and my brother out of a lot of trouble that we would have gotten in otherwise, because my mother was gone all the time. She worked 2 or 3 jobs at a time, would leave the house at 5 in the morning, get back at midnight. So, we frequently didn't see her except on the weekends. So we had to have some kind of strong commitment to doing right to keep us out of all kinds of trouble. There's no question about that. But, having a complete nuclear family is obviously the optimal situation. And a lot of the culture today tries to negate the benefits of that. And they tell you that any kind of situation and any kind of association is okay. It's not true. You derive your value system from your family. And if you don't get it from them, you get it from the outside. And frequently what you get from the outside is not conducive to success or to good behavior.
Yes, sir. And we see the breakdown in the nuclear family and family values being attacked every single day. Why do you think that has become such a target, especially in today's society?
Well, Nikita Khrushchev 60 years ago said of America, your grandchildren's children will live under communism, and we will not have to fire one shot. And then if you look at the writings of Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin and all those people, and they talk about the United States and how to bring it into subjection and how to make it into a communist nation, they agreed that we were too strong and that our families were strong and that our Judeo-Christian values were strong. And that if, in fact, you were to be able to bring down America, you had to attack those pillars. You had to attack their family. You had to attack their faith. And then you saw it begin. It started with, trying to redefine the role of men and what families really were. And you saw a lot of particularly poking fun at men and sitcoms and things like that. And now you have this attack on masculinity and the role of men. You have children being taught, even when you go down to the pre-kindergarten level. I saw one of the books they're teaching the kids from about worms, these 2 worms. And it's not really a male worm or a female worm. It can go either way, and it really doesn't matter. And they start very early with this propaganda and with the diffusion of the roles of men and women. And obviously, that can be very confusing to a young child. I looked at some of the fourth and fifth grade materials in Lee County, Florida, some of the things that the children were being exposed to. Uh, I was shocked. I mean, there was absolute pornography in those books. And, how are little kids supposed to be able to deal with this and to deal with people telling them, are you really a girl? Are you really a boy? Does it really matter? And confusing the roles of mothers and fathers. Uh, is there any wonder that our society is heading in the direction that it is so quickly? People are astonished with what's happening to us, and that we don't seem to have any common sense anymore. Uh, and and it's one of the reasons I say to people, speak up. Don't just go along with this stuff. If it is contrary to the values that you have, to the beliefs, and to your common sense, don't just sit there quietly in a corner and hope that nobody notices you. You got to have courage. You got to be brave. We cannot be the land of the free if we're not the home of the brave.
Yes, sir. And you hit the nail on the head. I tell these guys all the time, the world can't hear what you don't say. And if you're going through these problems and you're not brave enough to stand up, speak up for yourself, it's going to continue to get worse. And talking about the gender confusion, Dr. Carson, I don't know if you've heard about the case of Jeff Younger in Texas. He was on our show a little over a week ago. They have been trying to gender transition his son since he was 7 years old. Now, in my mind, that is child abuse. And then we see the creation of this new gender council that Biden is pushing. The one thing he didn't mention was men. And they just did it reluctantly in a press conference. They named everything gay, trans, women. And then it was like, and men, but you could tell that was not a focus of his. He talked about the stimulus checks coming out and how that means $7,000 for a single mom of four. And men and fathers are left out at every turn. Why do you think that is?
I think there's a deep desire to confuse us and to divert our attention away from the things that are important. And that's part of destroying the fabric of our nation so that you can substitute something else. There are those who want to fundamentally change America, and they could not do that as long as we were strong and had strong values and a strong identity. But how do you destroy someone's identity? You destroy their history. And you see there's been a big emphasis on that. Back before we destroyed ISIS, well, when they would go into places, what would they do? They would tear down the statues, they would burn the museums and the libraries, they would try to get rid of people's history, because your history gives you your identity, and your identities give you your beliefs. So if you can destroy that, then you have a tabula rasa, a blank slate, and you can start all over, indoctrinating people the way that you want them to go. It's all part of the plan. It's been done for hundreds, if not thousands of years to different societies. It's happening to us. You wouldn't have thought that it could happen to America. But if you let down your guard, if you don't recognize that you have to fight for freedom all the time, you cannot let your guard down, because you see how quickly this is changing.
We see what men are going through inside a family court, and some of them tooth and nail to be inside of their child's life. How does that make you feel knowing, I mean, you grew up without a father, but we've got out here that are trying so hard. 85% of the time, they're going to be non-custodial parents, seeing their kids once every other week or once a month. As a full-time father, that's just something I can't imagine. I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Well, it can be hard. What I would say is, men, be responsible fathers. Don't go doing things that might cause you to have a child that you don't intend to have, or create a relationship long term that you didn't intend to happen. you do have the ability to control that. So that's the first thing that I want to say. Don't get yourself in the situation in the first place. And some people say, oh, but I can't help it. Oh, she was just so beautiful. Come on, give me a break. You have a brain. And, the Bible says in 1 Corinthians 10:13, there has no temptation taken you but such is common to man. But God is faithful and will not allow you to be tempted above that you are able, but with the temptation will also make a way to escape that you may be able to bear it. In other words, you can deal with it. You don't have to make excuses. And then it is very unfair when that situation does occur, where that divorce or that separation occurs, and you have a child and you actually care about that child and you want to be a part of that child's life. And so often you are excluded from that. It's not fair. There is a natural bias toward women in that situation. And I think, men shouldn't just capitulate. I mean, if you want to take care of that child, you should make the case of how you're going to do it, what provisions you have made, and I think you'll have a reasonable chance if you're willing to do that. But most men just capitulate and they give up, and that child in the family, and so often, also, if you don't have the ability to take care of the child, but you want to be a part of that child's life, talk to the mother and arrange a mechanism whereby you can be part of that child's life and where you can be responsible for some of the financial things that child's going to need in their life. And I think most women would welcome that. Go back to the original thing I said. Don't get yourself in that situation in the first place. And, make sure that you're marrying for the right reason. And, don't be selfish. Don't think about how does it make me feel. This is my situation. Don't do that. If you learn how to put others first, it makes all the difference in the world.
Yes, sir. I believe prevention is better than the cure. So if we don't get ourselves in that situation, unfortunately, we're seeing marriage at a 55% divorce rate right now. And that really breaks my heart because I saw my mom and dad, they went through struggles, but they did everything to stay together. And, I believe, not just the breakdown of the nuclear family, but marriages, that we don't have enough emphasis on what's going on. In case it does, what we've been trying to get is some type of shared parenting legislation that says if divorce does happen, mom and dad would be created equal. It would be a starting point, a rebuttable presumption that if mom and dad are fit, willing, and able, they would do what's in the best interest of the child. I'm curious your thoughts on that, and if that could be something you could get behind, Dr. Carson.
I can, as the secondary option. Obviously, I think the first option is communication. Have you ever noticed that before people get divorced, they stop talking to each other? In the beginning, they couldn't stand to be away from each other, and they shared everything, and they communicated. And then they stopped communicating. And the next thing you know, their spouse is the devil incarnate. That's what happens when you stop talking. That's what's happening to our society at large. People get into their respective corners and they throw hand grenades at each other and they don't sit down and discuss things. The fact of the matter is, we as Americans have a lot more in common than we have that separates us. But we allow the media and we allow politicians to take those things that separate us and blow those up. Just like in the divorce situation, divorce lawyers will frequently exacerbate the situation because they don't really want the marriage to succeed. Their benefit from the marriage not succeeding, and there are many others who benefit from that. So, stop and think about that person that you're getting ready to ask a divorce from. Remember how wonderful they were before. Remember how you just couldn't even stand to be away from. It's the same person. So, open up the lines of communication. We need to think about the fact that marriage is for keeps. It was, and don't go into it with the thought, well, if it doesn't work out, don't even think that way in the first place. But if you do wind up in that situation, communication still becomes very valuable. Learning to talk, to your former spouse or partner makes all the difference in the world in terms of the relationship and in terms of the quality of life for the child that the two of you have created.
That was beautifully put, Dr. Carson, and I agree with you 100%. You're taking somebody that you once loved, you loved them enough to marry him and to have a child, and unfortunately, sometimes there's that breakdown in communication. They don't know how to speak to each other anymore. Now they make their way to family court and they're fussing over the house, the dogs, and unfortunately, a lot of times the child gets caught in the mix. And guys, the best thing, instead of getting government or getting family court involved, learn to speak to each other. I understand that's not always going to be the solution. It might not be something you can do, but it should be the number one thing that you try before getting everybody else involved. And I appreciate you saying that. But Dr. Carson, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, think about the children. It's so hard on them. I remember when my parents got divorced. It was just so devastating, and I would just pray all the time, Lord, please help them to get back together. It never happened, but as a child, I really didn't know what was behind it. It turns out that my father was a bigamist and had another family, and of course, that was devastating for all of us.
Dr. Carson, I don't mean to get too personal into your details, but what was that like as a kid finding that out? And what were some of the struggles that you had to walk through? If there's a father out there that's kind of involved in the same thing right now, or a mother, they're in extramarital affairs and this is going on. What was that like for you as a kid finding that out about your parent?
Well, your father, if you're a little boy, is sort of like your hero. And all of a sudden, you find out that he's not the person that you thought he was, and it's like someone pulled the rug out from underneath you, and you're just kind of floundering, and it was so painful. My mother did everything she could, and because she understood what we were going through, and she did everything she could to try to be both the mother and the father, and to look out for us and to make sure we were successful. My mother was a very beautiful woman and had no end of potential suitors. And she just said, my dedication is to my sons. I want to make sure that they become successful people. But fathers, if you're about to get divorced and you have children, think twice. Think 3 times, think 4 times. Do you really want to do that to your children? Do you want to really rock their world like that? Is this thing so irreconcilable that you can't fix it? And so often, and this goes for both men and women, it comes down to us thinking about ourselves first. I used to have a horrible temper problem. And, it could have cost me my freedom. It could have cost me my life. And fortunately, God helped me to see that it was a lot of times the problems were caused by me because I was selfish. I was thinking about how did I feel that somebody was in my space? Somebody did this to me. And when I learned to step outside the center of the circle and let it be about other people, the temper disappeared. I never had any more problems with it after.
That self-discovery is a beautiful thing, and I think so many people are afraid to kind of look at themselves from the outside, but that's where a lot of my growth came from, and it sounds like the same thing for you. I'm curious, Dr. Carson, as a father, I mean, was there anything that you took from your situation as a child and took it into your parenting nowadays?
Oh, without question. I was extraordinarily busy. Uh, but first of all, we didn't have children until we'd been married for 8 years. And the reason for that is we got married between my second and third year of medical school. I still had my whole residency to go through. And a neurosurgical residency is brutal. I mean, you're working 120 hours a week. So I knew that if we had children, they wouldn't know who I was. They said, Mom, that strange man was here again. I didn't want that happening. So we waited until I was finished with my residency to have children. And then I was still incredibly busy, traveling all over the world, giving lots of lectures, doing all kinds of things. And I just made it a rule when people invited me to do things that they had to accommodate my whole family. So all my kids had frequent flyer numbers for every airline. They traveled all over the world, and we had wonderful times together, bonding. And I think those are just very important lessons to learn, because so many people, particularly highly successful people, the children are the casualties. And they don't know their children don't know them. And it makes for a horrible start in life for those children.
Yes, sir. And when I first started this show, I had never been through any false allegations or paternity fraud issues. And I started having these men. I mean, we grew to 250,000 people in a little less than a year. And I started realizing how rampant all these problems were. And one of them is false allegations. That is a huge thing that's going on inside of family court. We see it going on inside of politics as well. And I know I had read up on, you're no stranger to that. I say that you was once accused of having a child by another woman, and you said you had never had any relations outside of your wife. Could you tell everybody a little bit about that to let them know how familiar you are with what they're going through?
Well, I was in the operating room and the phone rings, uh, and the nurse holds the phone up to my ear, and the university lawyers tell me that my wages are going to be attached for child support. I said, what are you talking about? I have 3 children. I support them very well. They said, no, there's a woman in Florida who says that you are the father of her son. And she knows where you went to elementary school and junior high and high school, even has a picture of you in scrubs. I said, anybody could get that. I mean, that's no, but it escalated. I had to get my lawyer involved. And then they wanted me to send a blood specimen so they could do DNA testing. And I said, there's no way I'm sending you my blood. It'll end up at some murder scene and I'll be in jail for the rest of my life. I said, you're not giving me my blood. And it continued to escalate, but, I held fast and it disappeared. Because what happens is very frequently, particularly somebody who's high profile and around in a lot of places, they assume that you've been messing around, probably with more people than you even can remember, and that you're going to just pay the money rather than be exposed and have your name tarnished. But, I knew that the only woman I'd ever slept with in my whole life was my wife. I didn't have to scratch my head and say, oh, gosh, was there a conference? That's something, I didn't have to do that. And, that's when God gives you certain guidelines of how to lead your life, it's not because he's a tyrant. It's because he wants to uncomplicate your life. He wants you to be able to really concentrate on what you're doing without always worrying about that tap on the shoulder. Remember this time, remember that time. Now, I will say one of the real advantages that we have now that we didn't have, decades ago, was DNA testing. You can prove whether you're the father of that child. And so when people bring false allegations, there is a way out, assuming that you really aren't the father of that child. If you are, it works in just the opposite direction. It proves that you are. And if you are, Just step up to the plate, recognize you have a responsibility. You did something that created a life, and you have a responsibility to help make sure that that life moves in the right direction.
That's right. And those allegations can be so dangerous, though. We saw what happened with Brett Kavanaugh, and this is something that was, a long time ago. It's very common inside of family court. I'm curious, Dr. Carson, what are some solutions you think we could get in place to kind of protect against those? Because it seems like this person can make this allegation so easy, and they don't even have to prove it. All they got to do is make the allegation, and these are allegations that can ruin someone's whole life. And if that person can prove themselves innocent, it seems like at times there's no consequences for the accusee.
Well, that's the key. What you just said. There's no consequences for false accusations, and there needs to be. And if there were consequences for it, you would see a lot of that foolishness stop almost immediately. And we need to start advocating for that. Men, speak up. And if you're falsely accused and it's proven that you're falsely accused, don't just say, "Phew," but broadcast what just happened to you so that other men know that too. That's very important.
Yes, sir. I just had a father. He was exonerated from those false charges. It took him 3 years to prove himself, and he was supposed to get his kids back in February for the first time in 3 years. And when he got to the parking lot, his ex-father-in-law got out and shot and murdered him. And mom's still out. I mean, just it's crazy to see what's going on, but I agree we got to get some consequences in there. But Dr. Carson, I know we're getting near the end of the interview, and I wanted to talk to you about something before we get out of here. You've got something coming out called the American Cornerstone Institute. Could you tell us a little bit about that and what purpose it serves?
Yes, I thought, as the job in administration was coming to a close, that finally I could retire and relax and play golf and just enjoy life. But, seeing the direction of the country, I said, I can't do that. I can't do that for the sake of children, grandchildren, all the people who are coming after us. I started thinking, what made America into such a great country? How did we go from a ragtag bunch of militiamen to the pinnacle of the world in record time? Was it just luck? Was it just a coincidence? And I said, no, it was because there were foundational pillars, there were cornerstone elements. And those things were life, liberty, community, and faith, not necessarily in that order. And I said, we need to start emphasizing those cornerstone principles once again. So we established not only a think tank, but a do tank. You actually do something. So that means like one of the things I learned as HUD secretary was the way you solve problems is you go out into the communities. You don't just do everything from Washington, D.C. And you have roundtables. And you bring people of varying opinions, varying political persuasions, but you put the facts in the middle of the table. And you say, let's solve this based on the facts, not based on your ideology or your political persuasion, but on the evidence that we have. And we were able to make tremendous progress that way. And that's what we need to do now because, let's look at those four cornerstone principles. Faith, our Judeo-Christian values taught us how to relate to our fellow man. It said, love your neighbor. It didn't say cancel your neighbor if you don't like them, if they don't agree with you. And so we need to move back toward that. When it comes to liberty, we need to recognize that this country was established by principles of freedom and liberty for people. It's the reason that people came here from all over the world. They didn't want an oppressive government with their foot on their neck, taking all of their resources and trying to control every aspect of their lives. And even you take something like freedom of speech, you have some people who say, well, that can only be taken away by the government. Not true. It can be destroyed by big tech and the media with compliance from the government. And that's what we're seeing right now. And we have to point that out and we have to fight against it. And then with community, one of the reasons that we were able to expand and grow and become strong is because we had strong communities, people who helped each other. You know, if it was harvest time and a farmer broke his leg, everybody pitched in and harvested his crops. They didn't ask what his political persuasion was. It was just the way that it was. And now we got a situation where someone's lived across the street from you for 20 years peacefully. And now they're your enemy because they have a yard sign that's different than yours. And that's total manipulation by the media and by politicians. And we, the people, have to be smarter than allow ourselves to be manipulated. A house divided against itself cannot stand. And then the whole concept of life. As we've gotten further away from respecting life, from the womb to the tomb, we've become more callous and crass in our relationships with each other. And we have to get back to the point where we respect that baby in the mother's womb, where we respect that homeless person on the street who's a crack addict or who has a mental disturbance. And we need to start acting responsibly toward those individuals.
Yes, sir. I couldn't agree more. And thank you for saying that. I think a lot of our problem nowadays is stemming from the media, social media. We have been taught if we disagree with somebody to completely cancel them off of our Facebook pages or whatever. Now they're putting the fact checkers up on everything. It's really a sick world we're living in because the media has the power to really help heal the nation. And yet it seems like they report on everything to divide us. What do you think? How much responsibility do you think the media has in all of this nowadays?
Well, our Constitution protects only one business, and that is the media. And why is that? Because they were supposed to disseminate unbiased information to the people, because our country was supposed to be run on the will of the people. But when the media puts their thumb on the scale and decides that they know what's best and they start manipulating people, then it distorts the whole foundation of our country. And what they don't realize is, you know, most of the mainstream media seems to be pushing this new socialist type agenda. They probably have not read their history. Because if they did, they would know that the first thing that socialist and communist governments do is control the media. So, you know, they're cutting their own throats. And I think a lot of them don't even realize that they're what Vladimir Lenin referred to as useful idiots. And I always talk to young journalists when I see them, and I tell them about what the original role of journalism is and how it has such a vital role to play in maintaining our freedoms. And I say, you can be right on the forefront. You can be one of the people who helps to change the narrative. And it's not because they're evil people, it's because in many cases they just haven't thought it through.
Yes, sir. And, my buddy said it best. He said, when they don't represent you in the media, you become the media. And that's what we're trying to do. We don't get much media behind our issues. And we're trying to create it. And having someone like you, Dr. Carson, I can't tell you how much I respect everything you do. I've met a lot of people, but you're one of the most humble and genuine people I've met. And I just want to say thank you so much for your hard work and for coming on here and talking with us. Can you tell everybody where they can keep up with you and how to get involved with the American Cornerstone Institute?
It's very easy, americancornerstone.org. And there are videos there. You can go there and read the Declaration of Independence. Please do that. And we're going to have the Constitution up there. And we want people to know who we are. Don't let somebody else interpret who we are. Read it for yourself. And it doesn't mean that we as a nation haven't made mistakes. We have. because we're composed of people and people are not perfect. But we need to learn from the mistakes and move forward, not try to cancel everything that's happened in the past. So AmericanCornerstone.org, please join our effort.
Yes, sir. On our way out, the last question, and I'll let you take us out with this question. If there's any fathers or mothers out there that are going through some of the issues that we've discussed today, what's something that you could leave them with, Dr. Carson, some words of encouragement?
Well, I would say to you, don't forget what's on every coin and bill in your wallet and in your pocket. It says, "In God we trust." Our Pledge of Allegiance says we are one nation under God. On the wall in the courtrooms, many courtrooms in our nation, it says, "In God we trust." Don't forget about your faith, because that really helps you to become the kind of person that we all need. Everybody has tremendous potential. That potential can be used for good or it can be used for evil. You get to make the choice.
Dr. Carson, thank you so much for coming and speaking with us today, and God bless you in everything you do. It means the world to us, so keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you for holding up the truth. We believe in you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us tonight. We are fighting for the rights of parents worldwide. If you want to help support our podcast and for us to continue this mission, please join us at patreon.com/DadTalkToday. You will find us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, CloutHub, Parler, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify, the podcast app, Google, Apple Podcasts. We're a little bit of everywhere. And guys, every time you like and subscribe, you help us continue this mission. Thank you, and we will see you next time.